Hey guys, this is Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard BJJ guy, here for BJJ Mental Models. Back in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to the academy just to learn some crappy technique from a random purple belt. You kids have it so easy because now you can just subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium and get tons of great audio courses to learn new techniques, enhance your mindset, and entertain yourself. You can even get personalized rolling reviews from some of your favorite BJJ Mental Models coaches, including me. It's like having your own seminar, you spoiled little whippersnappers. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium right now, get off my lawn, and go train.
Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 286. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach. And today, I'm here with a fellow Vancouver boy, first-timer to the podcast, but someone that I have known for quite a while, Lucas Wilhan. Lucas, how's it going, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me so much. I really appreciate being on this podcast. I've been a long-time listener and happy to talk about ankle locks today.
I am excited. This is a topic that has somehow never been covered on here before, but it is actually one of my favorite sets of submissions. Before we get into that, though, let's maybe just do a quick intro. Those in the Vancouver area probably know who you are. Very well known for going toe-to-toe in wars with my brother. but other than that, for those who maybe are just hearing the name for the first time, or maybe they've seen you compete but don't know much about you, why don't you do a quick introduction here?
Yeah, so I'm a first degree black belt based in central Vancouver. Got my black belt from Bruno Fernandes, who's in Montreal. I went from white to black, so he's extremely technical guy. Actually an ophthalmologist as well. So yeah, I was really in good hands over there, 4-time world champion. And yeah, I've been competing for 15 years now since, my high school years in wrestling. And then I went full on in gi jiu-jitsu after that. And then, started a bit more in no-gi lately with the emergence of the popularity of ADCC and all the opens popping up. So yeah, recently won the ADCC Opens in Vancouver and in Costa Mesa. And I just got third at the No-Gi Worlds recently at Master 1. So pretty proud of that one. First time medaling at Worlds.
Nice. Well, congrats, man. And you know what? I had no idea that you got your black belt from Bruno many, many years ago when Steve was a brand new white belt. One of the first seminars I ever went to was a Bruno Fernandes seminar when he was in Vancouver. And you know what? That actually gets me thinking I should probably talk to him and get him on the podcast because I remember really enjoying and getting a lot out of that seminar. So that's cool. I didn't know. It's definitely a small world.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. He's amazing, like technically, and just been a really great role model for me overall. So yeah, highly suggest like learning from him and talking to him. He for sure have a lot to say.
Amazing. Well, I will probably actually reach out and try to set that up. But in the interim, let's talk about the topic here today. You wanted to talk about ankle locks, both where they've come from, maybe some myths around them, the modernization of ankle locks and how they've evolved over the last few years. And of course, I guess the other thing is some of the concepts that tie all of these different types of ankle locks together. It took a while, but it looks like ankle locks now are kind of being included in the leg lock explosion, for lack of a better term. I was talking to Rob Bernacki about the leg lock game recently, and he mentioned that one of the challenging things about studying leg locks is you really need to go deep into the wilderness to learn these things. You can't just kind of dabble in leg locks. The systems are too complicated and ever evolving. Whereas with classic jiu-jitsu, I mean, look, a knee cut pass is a knee cut pass, right? I mean, there might be variations and changes and adaptations, but you can learn concepts that are still going to be around 10, 20 years from now. Whereas with leg locks, the evolution and the speed of evolution makes it kind of hard to keep up. Now, the funny thing about the ankle lock is for a long time, it felt like this was kind of excluded from that evolution. You know, there were all of these new positions being invented for leg entanglements and new variations on ways to shred someone's ACL. But the straight ankle lock was just the straight ankle lock. And then recently it started changing. And of course, I'm sure one of the things you're going to want to talk about is some newer evolutions like the shotgun ankle lock or the Polish ankle lock. But with that said, man, I'm going to turn it over to you. Give me the intro here. Tell me about ankle locks and where you want to start this conversation, because you probably put a lot more thought into this.
Yeah, exactly. First, I think I want to talk about the myth of ankle locks. Like a lot of people think they don't work. I mean, and I was one of them who thought that. The one that I thought never worked, I actually got caught once early on as a white belt, and then I was like, never again, because I thought I could just tough it out, and for the most part I could. So, and I developed a lot of flexibility with my ankle, just basically let my ankle pop a lot of times. I won't recommend that for everyone, but being a competitor, you kind of have to push the limits quite a lot. And honestly, it helped. Like my ankle got a lot more flexible, and I just never really respected it. I saw a lot of competitors not really respect it too much, but that is changing clearly. Like over the past weekend, we just saw Nicky Ryan beat JT Torres in like this knot position from the cross Ashi, and JT Torres is definitely no slouch, and Nicky Ryan was able to finish him with the ankle lock from that knot with the figure 4 grip, or the shotgun grip in general, like where you push on the shin and then you grab over your wrist, and then you can extend the shin back and then hyperextend the Achilles. So it's quite interesting to see at the highest levels. Back in the day, you barely see it, and nowadays you're seeing, I'd say more so the belly down finish, where you turn towards the mat and then you can extend, right? Driving your hips down, using your weight against your opponent's Achilles. And then that can create some serious breaks. And that's something you didn't see as much before. And previously, I believe you saw the finish more on the lower belts who haven't developed that toughness and the flexibility in their ankles. But now, like, you definitely see some breaks. And another reason I feel like why you see some breaks is because people are so afraid of the heel hook. So when they defend the heel hook, they flex their toes out, and that actually puts more extension on the foot. So then it's easier to hyperextend the Achilles, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. I think where a lot of the confusion about ankle locks and why they quote unquote don't work comes from old school traditional thinking. It wasn't that long ago that I remember sitting down and having a brown or a black belt at the time tell me that straight ankle locks just don't work against anyone good. And he said, no good guy's ever going to tap to that. And that was a very common way of thinking, even just a few years ago. And I think where that comes from is the assumption that when we're talking about straight ankle locks, we're talking about the classic standard Ashi. I just sit down and I kind of just put a little bit of pressure on your ankle. But, ultimately, we're not really doing this from a dominant position, and we're pretty limited in terms of what damage we can actually do from there. The thing about the classic standard Ashi, and for people who don't understand what I mean here, by the way, think of like single leg X guard, where you're kind of wrapping your body around someone's leg and you've got your outside heel kind of digging into their hip. That's the classic way to do a straight ankle lock. And then you just kind of lean back and you curl a little bit onto their leg. The challenge with the standard straight ankle lock is, number one, you just can't get that much braking power from there because your back is probably going to be somewhat towards the floor. Even if you angle yourself, it's just really hard to curl up. But the other thing is, there's a lot of ways for your opponent to escape from that. They can spin out, they can base and get up. And of course, if you train in the gi, it's extremely hard to finish a classic straight ankle lock because they can just grab your collar or lapel and pull themselves into you. And that makes it very hard to get that extension. So for a long time, I think people thought straight ankle locks don't work because in their minds, they were only thinking of that classic approach. It kind of reminds me of how 10 plus years ago, kimuras were looked at as a big guy move that little people should not even attempt to do. And then there was this big explosion of development in the kimura trap and realizing you don't have to finish this stupid thing from bottom side control. You can use this as a positional advancement tool to climb the positional hierarchy and get on top and get to their back. And then even a small person can finish a big person. I think the straight ankle lock is kind of in a similar boat where people have realized it's not just about doing it from standard Ashi. There's a lot of variations you can play that make this 100 times more effective than the way that white belts might be traditionally taught.
Yeah, agreed. My favorite way to do it is by reaping from like the Irimi, Ashigarami, when they're standing. And then if they counter the reap, I go to the outside Ashi, and then I can bring them down, post my foot on the hip, and then extend backwards. And that's actually that finish where you just get the foot on the hip and extend backwards is legal at all belts, right? So it's applicable for everyone. I think that's important to note. The reaping is not, but it is the most common, the most powerful way to finish, I find, is through the reap, and then you can go belly down. That setup I was talking about also works the other way around. So if you start trying to take them down to the outside, right, for like some sort of just basic sweep backwards from irimi, ashigurami, single leg X, or outside ashigurami, you can always look to reap if they start defending that way. So it's a bit of a dilemma, right? So it's either you go the reap away and then try to finish belly down, or you go outside and then you can post on the hip and then extend, right? And so that kind of like new way of thinking, like with the dilemmas, of course, the emergence of Danaher putting out instructionals and Gordon Ryan, like you're seeing these new ways to enter into the ankle locks. Of course, there's so many entries. You can literally go from the top as well, like opening the closed guard. The legs are just there. You can go even catch it from the mount, right? Bottom out. You can start kipping and then enter into the leg. So it's really everywhere. And another point I want to make about it is that you can get the Achilles grip and it's quite safe to keep, because nowadays you see everyone just try the heel hook, but you actually loosen things up as you go for the heel hook. So there's a lot of like rolling back takes, right? I think Danaher calls it the Ashi Bolo, and passes, from trying to free your knee, you can turn into them and slide out to get the pass. A lot more scrambles as you go for the heel hooks nowadays. So what I like to do actually is just keep hold of that Achilles lock and then follow my partner wherever they go, and I'll keep the position. There's no way they can actually take my back with the Achilles lock. And it could be actually a form of camping to just stay in the Achilles lock, right? More so in the outside ashigurami position where you can camp, kind of post out. Very hard for your partner to pass. And then you can take your time and then constantly put your partner in a checkmate position if you start going for the ankle lock finish, right? So they always have to kind of defend at least slightly. Even if they're super tough or super flexible, they have to, like, if you have good mechanics, good extension on the ankle, you have to slightly defend. And then from there, you can switch to a heel hook if they're putting on the boot, right? It's easier to catch the heel hook, or simply just wrestle up and then try to pass from there. So it's very multifaceted, just like the grip itself. And it's been great for me lately. I got several submissions in the ADCC Opens, and even in the gi, I caught it at the Masters World last time I went, I think 2 years ago. It is a bit tougher because all the lapel grips. You just have to address that before going for it. You could have a better bite because of the friction of the gi, but generally it is better, easier to get in no gi. So yeah, there's always these things you have to think about, like all different grips in the gis, but no gis. I find it's where it's at, because it can really control your partner there.
What's interesting is I train predominantly in the gi these days, and I agree with you that the straight ankle lock is a very nerfed position in the gi versus in no gi, because number one, as you mentioned, people can grab the lapel and they can use that to prevent you from extending that leg and isolating that leg. Very common straight ankle lock defense in the gi is people will grab your lapel and they'll pull towards you so that you can't extend and isolate their leg. The other problem, of course, in the gi is that reaping is not legal. So that very much kills a lot of the options that you can play if you want to go for leg entanglements. But I still find, even as a gi player, I use the straight ankle lock a lot to huge success. And yes, there's less I can do, and there's more things I have to be worried about, but I found ways to make it work. You talked about the belly down. You got to be careful in the gi, because if you go belly down in one direction, you don't want to reap the person's leg and wind up getting in trouble, but you can still go belly down in the other direction, and possibly not as strong, but it's possible to do a belly down ankle lock without reaping the leg, and it's still very powerful. I think a big thing about the straight ankle lock is it used to be thought of as the end of a sequence. It's a very committed technique, you might think. You get there, and at that point, you either get the straight ankle lock or you don't. And it was kind of considered a bad strategy, because you would see these people who would be in someone's guard and then they'd fall back for a straight ankle lock. But if they didn't get it, now suddenly they're on the bottom and they've lost the position. So people would think, well, this is a bad move because you have to sacrifice your position. But something that you brought up there is that is not necessarily the case. There's a lot of things that you can do from a straight ankle lock. One of them, as you mentioned, is if it's legal under the rule set, you can transition into and out of heel hooks. You can climb the leg entanglement positional hierarchy. You can do my favorite thing, which is pull their leg across to the other side into cross ashy, and then just get back up and leg drag them. That's my favorite thing to do if I don't get the straight ankle lock. I find it really messes with people's heads because they don't expect you to fall back and then get back up and pass them, right? They kind of think when you fall back, oh, now we're in leg entanglement mode. And they think we're going into this modern leg fighting jiu-jitsu game. When you just get back up and go back into attacking the top of their body, a lot of the time it really messes people up strategically.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I actually prefer not to go for the leg drag because I find I lose a bit of control. But I mean, sometimes like you just have to throw it out there, as an option. But yeah, that's interesting what you were talking about with the rules. Just got reminded that in IBJJF, the rules have actually changed for adult brown and black belts. You're actually allowed to start turning inwards, but not allowed to reap with your outside leg over the knee. So you can kind of like post on the ribs, start making them turn slightly, and then just turn inwards, and then you can go to the belly down finish. So we actually saw it recently at the GP, one of the lighter weights. So it proved to be very effective already. Yeah, everyone's looking to exploit the new rules already. And I think it could be a big thing. It could be a big evolution of the game in the gi. Just, since that rule is new, you just slightly turn, right? Like, I think they changed it because Cobrina's son got DQ'd for doing that move, but he had the butterfly ashi and he turned inwards. And then they deemed that like illegal. But it was a gray area because like the top player can turn in and then kind of cause that turn, that reap. So they changed it for that reason. But now I think it's going to be quite a powerful position. And another thing for the ADCC rule set, it's great to actually drop back for ankle lock because since it's a submission, your partner on top doesn't get sweep points, right? So that's another thing, a big thing for the ADCC rule sets. You can drop for submissions and not get penalized, really. Actually, a great way to go back to the bottom. You do have to be careful. Obviously, refs could make mistakes. And since it's such like an old rule, maybe you could still get DQ'd or something. So I'm always very skeptical of trying these new moves. And unless it's at the highest levels, at the World Championships or Pan Ams or at the ADCC trials where they really value like great reffing.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, I'd love to know your thoughts on regarding the straight ankle lock. What are the things that actually make for a good straight ankle lock? There's a lot of different ways that you can do such a thing, right? There's the classic version of the straight ankle lock. There are more modern versions like the belly down version or the Polish ankle lock, but there's going to be some commonalities between them in terms of things that make those work. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. What are some of the key elements that you're always looking for in a straight ankle lock to make it effective?
My philosophy is just to go for whichever grip you get right away. So if you get a good bite, you should start extending and putting pressure on that extended Achilles. If you start adjusting too much, sometimes they can put on the boot and then you have to restart and then maybe have to switch to something else. So if you just grab your wrist and then start extending, you can get a quick tap. Yeah, if you feel like you can get right away a good grip, like the shotgun grip or the Polish grip, go for it right away. But ultimately, yeah, whichever one is immediate, that's the one you should go for. And I think the key detail actually is try to minimize the space in between your elbow and your ribs on the side, right? So you actually want to close your elbow. If not, then your partner might be able to turn inwards or outwards and can loosen the lock, right? It's not just about choking up on the Achilles. It's about closing your elbow on your side. And then from there, you can actually put some kind of like toe hold pressure, like pressure on the foot. If you go a bit lower on the foot, you can break the small bones of the foot. And that's happened to me before. Of course, I still am tapped to it, but it's something that can cause some breaks and maybe slow your partner down if they're toughening it out. So yeah, those are my favorite ways to finish. And we're not talking about the Hyokis, all right? So if like the heel slips out, right, then there's even Hyoki locks where it can put more pressure on the knees, which I would gladly take if that's the first thing I get, right? But if the foot is in, right, you actually have a bit more control, and I would actually try to extend from there and then see where to go.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing about the straight ankle lock. It attacks the end of the lever, the ankle. And what winds up happening a lot of the time is you can't always control or adjust the grip that you've got very well. With a lot of other submissions like an armbar where you're attacking the middle joint, the elbow, as long as you can hold the armbar position, you can kind of fiddle with and get the grips that you want. But with an ankle lock, sometimes, if you don't have a good look, if you don't have the right grip on the ankle that you want, it's very hard to sit back into an ankle lock and then adjust it later. I've always kind of felt with an ankle lock that if you don't feel like you can get that proper ankle control, you probably don't want to go for it right away. But one of the things you bring up, which is really cool, is there's a lot more options now. So you have more flexibility there. Many, many variants of straight ankle locks that are quite different from the classic one. And as you mentioned, the ability to transition into things like heel hooks as well means that you've got a bit more options. So if you don't necessarily get the grip that you want right off the bat, you're not totally screwed. There's still adjustments that you can make. But I think you bring up a good point about making sure that you've got kind of the correct grip and that there isn't enough room for the person to pop their ankle out. I would say that another thing that I've always felt is very important with the straight ankle lock is knowing what the person's predictable responses will be and how they're going to try to get out of it. There's kind of three main ways that someone's going to try to get out of a straight ankle lock most of the time. One way is they're going to try to base on that foot, right? So maybe put on the boot and get up and put weight down. Or maybe they'll try to close the distance with you and they'll try to, especially in the gi, pull themselves in close, or they might try to spin out of it. If you fail to control the far leg or can't kill their rotation, then they might try to rotate out of it. None of these are all necessarily great options, and there's ways to follow through with them. But one of the mistakes I see people make is they don't think about what the person is likely going to do to try to deny the straight ankle lock. And so they'll try to get into that position, but they'll leave room for the person to put on the boot, or they'll leave room for the person to just get up and base or spin out. And so understanding that those are the things your opponent is likely to do, it allows you to get one step ahead and to make sure they can't do those things.
Yeah, agreed. There's a ton of things to do. And of course, you can switch up your ashigurami. You can go to cross ashi. You can switch it to 50-50 pretty easily, and it could be a control position, right? Just to keep the Achilles grip, even if you don't get it, and look to transition. So yeah, that's something I really like to do from cross ashi in particular. I get the Achilles grip, right? Instead of looking to try to elevate or do some other leg configuration, like for example, crisscross ashigurami. You guys know what that is, right? Where you interlace the legs between the hips. I just keep the Achilles in the cross ashi. I turn. I don't even do an inversion. I just turn, and that forces your partner to turn with you. If they don't, they hurt their knee. So they turn and then they go belly up with you, and then you can go into the heel hook pretty easily, or go to control the secondary leg, the far leg, and then look to control your partner, and then look to set up your attacks from there. So it really is a multifaceted position. You can, just with that grip, transition to so many different things.
I know we keep talking about the belly down ankle lock, but I'm kind of biased. It's one of my favorites. One of the things I like about it is because you're belly down, your own spine and your own butt kind of act as a frame that prevents the people from getting in close. With a traditional ankle lock, there's not much stopping the person from just getting up, right? And kind of closing the distance with you. But if you go belly down, then your own spine and your butt kind of create this frame that make it very hard for the person to get back up and free their leg again. So I think positions like that, if you look at a lot of the more modern ankle locks, they come up with creative ways to solve for these problems. They put a frame in place that prevents your opponents from getting up and closing the distance. And they often have a mechanism to prevent your opponents from rotating out. So I think that's kind of an example of why these probably work better than the classical one. And I'd say if you're going for a straight ankle, those are things you always want to have. You want to make sure that something is framing your opponent so they can't crowd you and get in close. You've got to keep that leg extended. But also, if they are on their butt, you got to make sure that they can't get up, get onto their feet, base on that foot that you're attacking, rotate out of it. And so I think a lot of these positions, like you talked about, like crisscross ashi, even from the 411 sometimes, one of my favorite ankle locks these days is the Texas cloverleaf, which for people who don't know, it's where you go to 411 or the saddle or the honey hole or whatever you call it, and then you kind of weave their ankles together, you cross them over, and then you put some pressure on one of the ankles. It's a very unusual ankle lock, and I love it because when you do this from 411, number one, it solves that framing problem. Your shin and is kind of acting as a frame that prevents the person from getting close. And number two, because you've got both of their legs entangled, they can't rotate or get out. It's just an absolutely helpless position. So, I mean, probably not super common because if you're in 411, there's more powerful breaks that you can do. But As a gi IBJJF guy, I love that position. And of course, as a pro wrestling fan, I'm always going to go for a move called the Texas Cloverleaf, right? Got to know my fake fight roots.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I love that position too. And you can actually turn it more into a knee bar if you get the kneecap facing towards your hips, right? Basically your center line. So I tend to try it and I get a lot of finishes. And of course, you can go for the Mikey lock if you just hold the toes in your neck and then you rotate the heel, right? It's actually powerful like combination. You can go for the clover leaf with the Mikey lock and try to hip in to the side of the knee. So yeah, quite a brutal position if you have the sweet spot to get the finish. I love it. And yeah, I love pro wrestling as well. So yeah, I mean, not so much nowadays, but yeah, I was a big fan and actually kind of got me into jiu-jitsu. So you know, I'm down for those names.
You're missing out, man. Pro wrestling is hotter now than it's ever been, but that's a topic for another podcast. Something I wanted to weigh in here, and you just touched on this, is there's really 3 different ways to break a joint. You can do a linear break, like an arm bar or a knee bar, where you're just extending back and you're trying to hyperextend the middle joint past its range of motion. You can do a rotational break, which is where you twist, right? So this is usually when you're doing something like a heel hook or a kimura, or you can also do a compression break, like a slicer, where you're just trying to put so much pressure on a bone or something that is just going to snap. And a lot of submissions only use one of those mechanics, but you can make almost any submission more powerful if you can find a way to have multiple breaking mechanics involved. So a common example of this is if you're struggling to finish a knee bar. A good reason why that might be is because you're just looking at it as a linear break. If you are just grabbing someone's leg and trying to pull it back and break the knee, it can actually be very hard to finish just by doing it in a linear motion because the leg is one of the strongest parts of the body, right? You using your body to attack the person's leg is going to be a lot harder than attacking their arm or their neck. So one of the ways that you can make a knee bar more powerful is by turning it into a hybrid where instead of just pulling the leg back, you also twist it a bit, right? That also takes the knee out of its kind of standard range of motion, makes it very hard to attack and defend from. And the same thing works with arm bars as well. If you're just pulling the arm straight back, that's probably not going to be as powerful as if you find a way to do a bit of a rotation on it. And one of the cool things about these more modern ankle locks, like, you know, you talked about the cloverleaf there, is it is what we would call a hybrid submission. If you've ever been in a Texas cloverleaf, it is a linear break, a compression break, and a rotation break at the same time. You're getting a bit of all of those, and that's what makes it so powerful. It's not necessarily as immediately devastating as something like a heel hook, but you've got linear pressure. Like you said, there's some knee bar pressure. You've got rotational twist, which attacks the knee a bit. And then you've just got straight up compression power because there's a bit of a slicer going on in their ankle. So that's always something that I love about kind of more modern submissions is they find more than one mechanic to break something. And I think, again, with any submission, if you're struggling with the ankle lock, the traditional straight ankle, I'd always tell people, look for ways to add more breaking mechanics to it. So the belly down, for example, is very powerful because you're not just doing linear braking pressure on their ankle anymore. Because you're turning belly down, when you rotate your body, it rotates their ankle as well, and it puts a bit of a twist on it. Same thing with the Polish ankle lock, right? Because of the grips, there's a bit of sideways pressure on there, and that's going to make it more powerful than if it was just a classic, I'm going to lean back and snap your ankle move, right? That's part of the reason why these modern versions are so much more powerful than the classics.
Agreed. And I actually have a great example of that one. So of another, rotational knee bar. So I've recently fought Nikki Ryan at the ADCC trials, the East Coast version, the 5th round. And I mean, it was terrible. He's super technical. I learned a lot from that match. But yeah, he put me in a heel knee bar. So he got my left leg in a Rimi Ashigarami or single leg X, whatever you want to call it. And then I immediately started to reap. And then I turned to try to like spin out and free my knee from his knee line. And he right away locked into outside ashi, and the angle we were in was more of like a knee bar angle where his hips were directly on my kneecap. So he had the heel hook, he had my heel caught, and then he basically went belly down on my kneecap and got the finish. I knew it was done because I basically couldn't move and the pressure was coming on. So he put me in checkmate pretty much. Yeah.
I got a question for you. What are some of the other more modern straight ankle locks that you've seen develop? I mean, the mind goes to a lot of places. There's the Cowterra ankle lock. I fucking hate that one. There's a lot of different moves coming out of nowhere. Anything else that you've been working on or studying that you think is emerging and is worth looking into?
Honestly, it's been more about wrestling for me. And I mean, it's just a bit more of the trend. I've been looking at the new passing methods and just trying to combine all the things I already knew with like some new tactics and strategies. So yeah, I'm actually not focusing on leg attacks at the moment. Of course, I'm going to cycle back to it come like the ADCC Opens, that I'm planning on doing in Vegas. So yeah, I mean, basically the push-pull dynamics in wrestling, this is going completely the other way with the talk, but there's just so much new stuff. And there's kind of like a meta with the jiu-jitsu wrestling because of the posture is so upright. So just have to find new ways to take your partner down and try to stay on top and then look to pass. I'm always down to see what's trending right now. And, it just keeps me motivated and passionate about the sport. If I'm looking at, what's coming, what's new out there. And yeah, just refining the wrestling, looking for a lot of front headlocks, looking for a lot of single leg trips with the leg up high. So what about you? What are you looking at now?
I'm looking at getting back on the mats. I tore my labrum and it sucks, man. I can't move my elbow much. So I'm just in the process now of trying to figure out what I need to do there. I'm just doing physio and hopefully I won't need surgery, but it's still kind of early on. So I'm trying to figure that out. But I guess something that I wanted to pick your brain on in terms of what I'm working on and what I'm interested in at the moment, camping. You mentioned this earlier. I love the idea of camping. I mean, deliberately or not, I've been doing it for years, mostly because I'm just very lazy. And I would prefer to make the other person expend their energy while I don't. But you talked about how camping is an option from the ankle lock game. And that's something I've never really thought of. Normally, when I think of camping, I'm thinking of I'm in a knee cut or I'm in a stack or something like that. And I am just basically making you work from the bottom. But I've never thought of leg entanglements as a camping option. Maybe expand a bit on that because I'm curious as to how you tie all of that together.
Yeah, first I want to give credit to the person I heard it from. Of course, is from some like reel I saw on Instagram. I think it was Joseph Chen or like Jason Rao. And they're all, they're with the times. And it's probably one of those two. Yeah, there's so much on Instagram that I just, I'm just, keeping tabs on. And they mentioned that. And I was like, oh, I do outside ashi. I should consider this like a camping position because I can just stay here and tie my partner up and not think about really working too much and getting my partner stressed with the ankle lock submission. And then they're going to feel that heat, and then it's going to be easier for me to get up and take the sweep or get the submission. So it's great. You can just go on the outside ashi, both feet on the outside. Make sure to keep that Achilles grip. If you let it go, then it's dangerous. You can get leg drag. You can get your back taken with the ashi bolos or rolling back takes, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, just keep it there. You just want to make sure you're framing with a cross shoulder post or even a lat post. And then you can try to invert your inside knee to your partner's center line, basically. And then you can keep pushing your partner away. And then you kind of like off balance to the left, to the right, reaping if you want, and you could pick your moment to go in, finally take your partner down to a hip or a knee, or look through the full reap to go into the belly down finish, or to transition to whichever ashigram you want. So inside ashi, cross ashi, double trouble. There's so many options, but yeah, you could basically camp there until you feel the moment is right. And I think it's something you guys should really like look into if you guys are fans of outside ashi and keeping that Achilles grip.
That's interesting because when I think of camping, I'm normally thinking of brutal pressure. Because when I think of camping, what I'm often trying to do is get into a position where I am able to hold it indefinitely and my opponent is suffering. So this often means that I'm holding them upside down or doing something like that, or I'm putting a lot of weight down on them. Whereas from a leg entanglement position, you're not really doing that. It's more of like a checkmate where I guess the pressure is more psychological than physical, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a checkmate, actually. I just realized I was using the term wrong. It's a check, right? So you put them in check and then they have to start reacting. And then if they don't react, then it will be checkmate, right?
Here's a question for you. I always ask this around submissions because some submissions vary a lot depending on body type. Do you find that you have to adjust the way that you play straight ankle locks depending on the body type of the person that you're going up against? For example, do you play differently against big people, small people, people with long legs, people with short legs. Curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I am 6'2" and I fight at 170 or 77 kilos in the ADGC. So that definitely helps with my finishes with the ankle lock. Your attributes definitely help with the techniques you're going for, right? So if you're long, the ankle locks are definitely a technique that you should be going for because you can create so much extension in the Achilles and the limb. And if you're shorter, you can still make it work, but just know that if you're fighting someone much taller than you, they can put on the boot and then kind of force you to put more pressure on the calf muscle instead of the Achilles. So I think that's also why I don't respect the ankle lock on me as much, because I can always extend my leg and then make it harder for my partner to get the ankle lock, or even heel hooks. It's harder to get a good purchase on my heel because I can extend so far. Basically, boot my foot to their shoulder. So it would be definitely very difficult for them to get.
Yeah. As a smaller guy, I have found that with ankle locks against bigger people, you're right. What you have to be mindful of against a larger opponent is they might be able to put on the boot if you're just wrapping your whole body around their leg and you're not thinking about the length of that leg. Where I think this is most obvious is with the traditional straight ankle lock, right? Because if you try to go into like a standard ashi from the bottom and just lean back, if the person's leg is significantly longer than yours, it's very hard from that position to actually secure and get braking pressure because the leg, again, the lever is just so long. With the straight ankle lock, you often want to be attacking more the end of the lever. So I find if I am sparring with someone who's much bigger than me, much bigger than me, and I want to go for a straight ankle, I often will not really put much effort into a traditional one, and I'll go right for something like the belly down, because if I'm belly down, I can sort of walk myself closer towards the end of the lever. And again, I can use my own spine and my butt as like a frame to make sure they can't get any closer. I can even put my shin down on top of their leg so they can't put the boot on as easily. But that is just something that you need to be aggressively focused on, is if the person's legs are much longer than you, you have to find a way to attack the end of that lever and create enough frames that they can't get in close or put on the boot. And just the mechanics of that change a lot if you're giving up like a half foot to a foot versus the person that you're playing against.
Agreed. Another thing you can think about is if you're fighting a heavyweight who's massive, or just like the size discrepancy is like probably more than 30 pounds. So if I'm fighting a light feather, it doesn't even matter where my grip is. If I'm at the calf or the middle of the shin, I could maybe even get a break there because of the pure size difference. So that's something that you have to take into account, because if you're fighting someone who's ultra heavy and you're a middleweight, you pretty much have to avoid that position, because if they're going 100% on your leg, even if it's at mid shin, I've seen some breaks happen. It could be devastating. So you see those videos of guys breaking bats on Instagram or YouTube. That can happen to your shin. So just be careful. Hopefully you've had your calcium throughout the week when someone's yanking on your shin there.
That is a good point. The straight ankle lock technically is supposed to attack the ankle, and conventional wisdom is if you put on the boot and they're attacking the shin, you'll be safer. But that's different from being actually safe, because there are people out there who are strong enough and can get enough of a crunch on the ankle that they can snap your shin from doing that too. So I would encourage people to understand that just because you've put on the boot and they're not attacking your ankle anymore, that doesn't mean you're completely safe, right? They can now attack your shin. And honestly, in terms of injuries, I would much rather have someone pop my ankle than snap my shin, right? If someone is strong enough that they can actually break your shin from there, you got to be very careful and respect that.
Agreed. Yeah. If I'm fighting someone like Big Dan, I'm probably tapping or just avoiding that position altogether, keeping the inside position always and avoiding someone grabbing onto my leg.
So what are some of the positions that you feel are kind of mechanically superior if you're playing the straight ankle? We talked about the belly down and how awesome that is. But what about some of the other stuff? I'm curious if you've been playing around with, say, you mentioned the Aoki lock, for example, or the Polish ankle lock. Like I said, I haven't been able to actually practice these because I've been off the mats due to injury, but I'd be curious to know your thoughts on some of these more modern takes on the classic.
So the Polish ankle lock is the one Bernacki showed recently, right? I think he did.
Yeah. It's from Mateusz Soszyński. I believe it's
Yeah.
often referred to as the Polish ankle lock or the shotgun ankle lock. I haven't had a lot of time to study it, but my understanding is it's kind of more of a sideways break than a traditional straight ankle.
Yeah, I've tried it a bit, but I think it takes a bit too long for me to set up. And it has to be right on the ribs, the right way, like the heel just resting there. So I generally don't look for that one. Yeah, the Aoki, I find you don't have to be as precise. You just take the heel out and place it on the side of your ribs, a bit easier. Then you have to basically put pressure to the side of the knee as you rotate the other way at the toes. So yeah, I've been playing around with that, but yeah, I tried it actually against Matt a couple times. And it didn't work. So there's still some adjustments. I think I really have to work on blocking the hip a bit more. Of course, if they gain height, if they're really tall as you go for the Achilles lock, it can be tough. I've seen variations of the belly down Aoki lock. I tend to lose it a lot because people slip. And yeah, ultimately, I always go back to the straight ankle lock because it's just very secure. And I find I can use it in tandem with the heel hook really well. So I basically just go more for the ankle lock and then look to see if I can get it. If not, wrestle up, classic jiu-jitsu, sweep, pass, submit. So yeah, it's important not to be tunnel vision with it, right? So I know that I would just have to let go if it's not working. That decision's pretty quick. I can tell, since I've been doing it for so long, I can tell if someone's not going to tap with it. So I just let go and start, or I don't let go, I keep the grip. And then I try to transition to something else. So it's important to develop that sensitivity. So with anything with the Aoki locks or the Polish lock, see if it's working for you. Of course you have to give it a chance, it takes several months. Maybe who knows, in several months it's going to start working for me. But, I think the Aoki lock is closer for it to work for me. But yeah, ultimately I prefer the straight ankle lock.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would expand on that. People do tend to get myopic and they get tunnel vision when it comes to leg submissions especially. And with the straight ankle lock, that can be a bit dangerous because if you overcommit to it, there are a lot of options for your opponent to get up or rotate out or advance position. And a very common beginner mistake is they see the ankle and they just go for it and they'll abandon position and forget about the fact that if their opponent gets out, they might now be in a way inferior position to where they were before. So there very much is a sensitivity there. You have to really feel for, hey, do I have this or do I not? Some submissions are more touchy like that. An example I would give is the Kimura, right? With a Kimura, if I go for a Kimura on you and I get the grip, but it's not technically tight enough to finish, I don't necessarily need to let it go. I can keep playing that and I can go for a Kimura trap game and try to advance position. I don't have to feel like, well, I got to abandon this or else Lucas is going to make me pay. Whereas with the straight ankle lock, if you don't quite have it, you don't want to just sit there and overcommit to it because it gives your opponent the opportunity to start advancing position quite seriously. Some positions are very touchy like that, where you have to develop that sensitivity. Do I have this or do I not? And be willing to let go and move on to something better if you don't. That, I think, is where a lot of the classic criticism of the straight ankle lock has come from, is that it has been looked at as a sacrifice technique, especially because you used to see all of these people who would be standing and then they'd fall back to an ankle lock and lose the whole thing. So like with most submissions, you never want to play a submission that way, where it's all or nothing. And if I lose this, I'm in this way worse off position than I was before. That's always something to think about. And you've got to be ready to let it go and move on to the next thing if it's just not working the way that you expected.
100%. Yeah, Kimuras, I feel like it's pretty dangerous to go for if you're going for it from the bottom, because if it fails, then you can actually get head and arm choked. So yeah, that's a whole other topic, I guess, but
I never attack Kimuras from the bottom. Especially bottom side control. I would never do that. Bottom half guard, I've never had luck with that, but I respect it. There's a lot of people who are very good at snatching that Kimura from bottom half, and then before you know it, they're on top, and then they're on your back. So I definitely respect it. But the thing about the Kimura is that behind the back rotation makes it very hard to escape. Whereas with a straight ankle lock, there's so many ways that you can kill that submission. So you've just got to be very mindful of that before you roll the dice and go all in on trying to finish the ankle lock.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, to your point, some of the more modern variants are created to address those problems. As an example, we were talking earlier about the Cow Terra ankle lock. That is one that I think is very body type dependent, and it's either going to work for you or it doesn't. I spent a few hours working with Rob Bernacki on trying to learn this move, and I really came out of that feeling like I just don't have the body type for it. And for those who haven't seen the Kyotera ankle lock, it's really weird. It doesn't work the way that a lot of standard ankle locks do. In fact, when I first saw the Kyotera ankle lock, I thought that it might actually invalidate some of my thinking on jiu-jitsu because it works so weird. And I thought, shit, maybe I got to rethink how I conceptually understand how legs work. But over time, I kind of realized how this move actually does the same thing as other ankle locks. It just looks very, very different. There's kind of a stomp down on top of the person's leg that you've got. If you think of a classic ankle lock, you're often wrapping your whole body around their leg. Whereas with the Kyotera ankle lock, you kind of cross your own leg. It's very hard to explain through audio, but you sort of put your own leg over top of theirs and you stomp down, and that prevents them from being able to get up. But the thing I came away from that thinking is I've got short, thick legs, and that's a variant that I think really works better if you've got longer, skinnier legs. So the good news is, though, we talked about the Aoki lock, the Polish lock, the Texas cloverleaf. There's so many variants of this move now that regardless of your body type, I'm pretty sure you're going to find one that works for you. Just like how with the guillotine, for instance, there's a lot of different variants and people play it differently depending on their arm length. I think for the ankle lock, the important thing is not just to try it and then say, this doesn't work for my body type, but rather to look at some of the other options that are being explored, because there's probably going to be one that works for you regardless.
Oh, 100%. I agree. The Kyo lock, or I call it De La Riva ankle lock or outside hook ankle lock. I mean, same thing. Yeah, it works for me, but I find if someone's expecting it or already knows that it could come, it's much harder to set up, right? And then if they know the defense, but you can always transition from there too. Like you can go into outside ashi. I've done that a couple times in training. It's definitely something to explore. And yeah, it can work for me. I'm long and lanky. I can finagle my my arm in from the De La Riva. But yeah, of course, something maybe eventually can work even better for me with time, but it's not something I focus too much on. But yeah, you could definitely, with whatever body type you are, you could definitely implement some sort of ankle lock, I really believe. So yeah, like you don't always have to press on the hip, right? Usually I like to press on the hip with my inside leg. So if I'm attacking my partner's right leg, right, with the Irimi Ashigarami, I bring them down to a hip. I go with my inside leg, my right leg, right posted on the hip, and I get the sole of my foot pressing really hard, and I find that works really, really well, and you get more extension. So that's one. But I'm sure, if you're smaller, you can post on different parts of the body. As long as you're at the kneecap, I believe you can get significant pressure with the ankle lock. I've seen people triangle their legs at the kneecap and then get a finish. So that's something you can try.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, great chat here. I guess if we were to tie this up, any closing overall thoughts or concepts you have on how the ankle lock would work? I mean, I've got a few in my head, but I'll turn it to you first. Any overarching patterns or, dare I say, mental models that you think always apply for when you're attacking the straight ankle?
Yeah, just keep that ankle really tight, the Achilles really tight to your side, close your elbow, force up your hand to your chest, and don't let it drift downwards, right? So that's really important. I see a lot of beginners do that. So they bring their arm around the Achilles and then they start putting pressure and they let their forearm drift downwards. So you have to lock it like a crowbar against your chest, nice and tight. Usually you want to have your hands closed, and then you post. You can, if you're going belly down, I prefer to post on the side of my face so it's harder for my partner to rotate. And then I basically I use the side of my face as a block, prevent them from turning. And then I basically hit straight down right into the Achilles. If you're not doing belly down, I recommend to go post on your shoulder, and then again, keep everything tight, hand nice and high up to your chest, and then post on the shoulder and extend while you press on anywhere above the knee, ideally at the hip. In my opinion, that's probably the best, most robust kind of post you can get. And then you extend the hell out of it. You have to use strength as well to get the finish. That's another thing beginners tend to miss out on. They don't extend and use enough strength, right? It's something where you really have to put fear into your opponent while you're putting the pressure. So really try for it if you feel like it's there, and then tell your partner to tap if if you feel like they're not able to take it. But also, like, if they're toughing it out, tell them to tap, because maybe they want to tough it out, and coincidentally their Achilles can get a bit more flexible, and you don't want to tell people just to stop. It's relatively safe. You're not going to be out for several months if you get hurt the Achilles, right? Unlike a heel hook where you could get surgery. I mean, I'm no doctor, but if someone wants to tough it out, I would kind of let them, because that's my experience. If they're a competitor, I toughed it out and I was fine. I think it made me maybe stronger. I don't want to be sounding too alpha or anything, but go hard and make sure everything is nice and locked in, and try to get the submission.
That is one interesting point about the straight ankle lock. It is very hard to tell where someone's flexibility and tolerance is without doing it to them. Some people just have unbelievable flexibility in their ankles, and they're just not going to tap unless you really shred it. But then there's other people who they have very little flexibility, and as soon as you get the bite, they're already tapping. It depends. And that is one of the tricks with the straight ankle lock, is because of all of that variability, it's really hard to know what's going to happen before you do it. A lot of other submissions are not like that. I mean, as an example, with the guillotine, there's very few people who can just tough out a guillotine, where you get into the guillotine and you think, oh, I guess guillotines don't work on this person, right? That's very, very rare. Whereas with the straight ankle, because of the size of the person's foot and the size of their leg and the flexibility of their joints, you can get some people who just, you go for it and you do everything perfect, and you still aren't able to break, which is another reason why I think it's important to be willing to transition out of that if it's not working. Some other things I would say, we kind of talked about this earlier in the chat, but in addition to making sure that you've got the bite and the distance correct, I would also say you want to have some sort of frame in place that prevents them from crowding you and getting in close. All of the good straight ankle locks will have something like this, where there is something preventing the person from getting in close and putting their weight down on you. You want to be able to address their ability to rotate and spin out. It's not the end of the world if they do. And in fact, if the person does try to spin out, they can often make this way worse for themselves because they can open up things like heel hooks, but people will still do that. And you've got to be ready for that and have a game plan to either prevent them from spinning or be ready to adjust if they do. I would say, and you talked about this very astutely, you got to make sure there's actually room to get braking pressure. If you're doing a classic like 1990s straight ankle lock and your shoulders are on the mat and you try to lean back, you might just not be able to get enough leaning to do a break. And so part of the reason why you might do something like go belly down is it gives you a lot more leverage and a lot more ability to kind of break that leg. So you always have to think about that. And I guess the last thing I would say, like you said, is you want to think about dilemmas. If the person thinks that the only threat they have to deal with is a straight ankle, then it's very easy for them to understand what they have to do. But if you're switching in and out of positional advancements or into or out of heel hooks, then suddenly it becomes a lot more variable and harder for them to know what they're going to expect. So just some thoughts that I have. Anything else you would want to add or riff onto that? Or
Oh, that was really well said. Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, closing thoughts, Lucas, anything before we tie this up that you wanted to weigh in on the straight ankle lock, or just general thoughts about jiu-jitsu as a whole?
Yeah, I'm excited to watch everything. I'm also a pretty big fan of jiu-jitsu, I'm excited to see the ADCC worlds and the IBJJF worlds. I don't think you guys should, or anyone should kind of be against one, the gi or no gi. It's all jiu-jitsu. We're all here as a whole. Train both if you can, and because you're going to be able to get something from both of them. And I just want to stop the hate between gi and no gi. Do both. You can do well at both. I'm personally a gi and no gi competitor, so and I make ankle locks work both gi and no gi. You can be good at both and still and have passion for both.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I couldn't agree with you more about the gi no gi debate. I honestly don't understand it. I don't get what people think it achieves to waste their time arguing about this. They're both fun. They're both cool. It's like arguing about whether baseball or basketball are better. They're just different things, right? And except the cool thing is, in this case, they are related grappling arts, and there's a lot of commonalities between the two of them. Although they have very much diverged over the last 10 years, they're still both jiu-jitsu. And regardless of whether you train gi or no gi, you're going to get something valuable about it. Depends very much on what your goals are. But yeah, I don't understand the need for gi people to hate on no gi or no gi people to hate on the gi. It seems odd to me. Really, the more jiu-jitsu grows as a whole, I think the better off we all are. However it happens doesn't really matter to me, as long as it's legal.
Yes, as long as it's legal. Yeah, no eye gouges, headbutts, or or groin shots, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the gi, let's plug your gym, man. Lapel Arts, if people want to come visit you or train with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so Lapel Arts in central Vancouver, more specifically the Fairview area, close to Kitsilano. Yeah, come by. You can check out our website. We get a free trial like any other place. And we're actually gi and no gi, despite the name, but we focus on the modern game in the gi and no gi, right? So we're going to go over like the heel hooks in no gi and all the modern passing and wrestling, gi, lapel guards, of course, but not just focus on lapels, open guard, passing, takedowns. You got it all grappling wise. And I have Instagram. My Instagram is Lucas Wilhan. Go give me a follow over there. Our gym is Lapel Arts. My partner, Paulini, she's also, the reason why I'm able to have a gym. She's amazing. So give her a follow, Paulie back as well. And we're going to have a ankle lock instructional on our Teachable. You can find a link on our website or through the show notes. I think Steve's going to be putting it on the show notes. So yeah, check us out.
Yep, absolutely. Like you mentioned, I will put links to all of that in the show notes. So if you are listening through the website or your podcast player, just pop those open, single tap to check out Lucas's stuff. Really curious about the courses that you're making there on your Teachable site. So I'll definitely include a link to your Teachable as well. And I think everyone knows all of our stuff lives at bjjmentalmodels.com. Closing in on 300 episodes of this thing. The one thing that makes us a bit different is we want every episode to be timeless and educational. So we don't talk a lot about current events. You should be able to go back to episode 1 and listen and get value out of it just as much today as you would have if you listened 5 years ago when we kicked this thing off. You can also join our newsletter. We're about to break 10,000 signups there. The newsletter is an awesome resource if you want expansions on what we talk about on the podcast. I also have a tendency to give out free stuff there and free instructionals. So if you like things that don't cost anything, join the newsletter. Of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. And of course, the way that we pay the bills here is BJJ Mental Models Premium. That's also at the website, bjjmentalmodels.com. That is how we float the boat here. So please do consider signing up there if you haven't already. There's a lot of reasons you would want to join Premium. The main ones include over 100 hours of audio style courses. The thing that makes us different from a lot of others is that instead of focusing on step-by-step tactical video, we focus a lot more on strategy, big ideas, philosophy, mindset, and of course, mental models for jiu-jitsu. That translates very well to audio, so it's a cool way to expand your game when you're not at a computer, you're commuting to work or whatever. And of course, we also do rolling reviews as well. So if you are in our coaching tier or higher, we can get some really elite black belts breaking down your footage. It's an awesome level of feedback you're not likely to get anywhere else. And of course, there's many other benefits as well, including exclusive pro jiu-jitsu podcasts you can only get as a premium member, our community. Brother Matt, actually, his video library is rolled into our coaching tier as well. So if you've ever wanted BJJ Mental Models, but to use your eyeballs instead of your ears, we do have a video library now. Just check out the coaching tier. Again, all of that stuff and all of Lucas's stuff is in the show notes, but you can catch our stuff at bjjmentalmodels.com. Pretty easy to find. But Lucas, man, great to have you on. I've been wanting to have you on for quite a while. Thanks so much for doing this, man. And hey, best of luck in the future with the competitive scene. I always love seeing Vancouver people finally get some exposure on the international level. And, between you and Matt, it's just been awesome to see your names out there. Harrison Woods as well. Love to get him on the show at some point. For a long time, Vancouver was kind of a very quiet market on the jiu-jitsu front. The people up here knew that interesting things were happening, but we didn't really have name competitors out there that people could attach to. So it's always awesome to see guys like you compete at the ADCC level, man. And I'll be keeping an eye on you in the future for sure.
Man, thanks so much for the compliments. Really appreciate it. And we all made each other better by competing with each other. So yeah, thanks to Matt for helping me level my game up. And I'm excited to see what the future is in store.
Oh, you don't have to compliment Matt on here. You can talk shit about him if you want.
Yeah.
I talk shit about him all the time. So please do not feel like that is a problem.
No, I respect his game and everything. We do have a bit of a rivalry, but I really appreciate the good competitiveness that we have between each other. You know, you have to, I mean, yeah, your competitors are your biggest teachers. So I learned a lot from rolling and training with them. I actually trained with them a couple times. So
awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Lucas, man. This was a great chat. I always appreciate having new guests on here. Super cool to have someone that I actually know in the real world as well. So thanks for coming by, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Thanks to the listeners too. We'll talk to you next time. See you soon.